Okay, so this video is going to focus on species diversity and basically like community structure and how we can measure the biological diversity or species diversity within a community. So let's go ahead and first define species diversity. So species diversity has two parts. It has species richness, which is basically like the number of different species you would find in a community. It also has relative abundance, which is like the evenness or the proportion of each species within that community. So let's go ahead and talk about two different communities here. We have community A and we have community B. So if I look at these, here I have trees in both of these communities. Now, when I look at them though, we're going to break it down into species richness as well as relative abundance. And I don't know, we'll put my face here, I guess. So if I were to look at the two communities, they both have 4 different species of tree. And so their species richness is 4. Now, if you were in like a rainforest or something and you counted all the different species, you would have a very high species richness versus something like Greenland or something, right? If you're out on the ice and you're trying to count up living things, your species are different species. Your species richness might be low, maybe some birds or something, polar bears. Now though, let's go ahead and talk about relative abundance or evenness or kind of like the proportion of the different species within that community. So in community A here, if we look at the different species of trees, what I find is that they're pretty even. I have, the way I happen to make it is I have about 25% of the community is each of the 4 species, right? So I have 16 trees here and I have 4 of each kind. Then if I look at community B though, what I notice is that for this species, I see only 2 out of the 20 trees there are that species. For the pine tree, I only have 1. Here I only have 2 out of 20 and then the rest are, looks like oak or something maybe. So 15 out of 20. So here the relative abundance is very different, even though the richness is equal. Now, why this matters, and this is really going to be in topic, or AP Bio topic like 8.7 maybe, when we talk about why diversity matters, because if there's like a disruption to the ecosystem, let's say an invasive species comes, so maybe it's like some kind of insect that like bores into the trees and destroys them. And so it spreads through both of these communities. And let's pretend that it kills off the oak trees or like one of the types of species. Now what I find here is that community A was more resilient to that invasive species simply because there was more evenness in the different types of species. Now, we can elaborate on the importance of species diversity in a different topic. But let's go ahead and look at this cool, I don't know about cool, but look at a math formula that we can use to calculate species diversity or the diversity index within a community. So it's called the Simpsons Diversity Index, and it's a measure of diversity, and it takes into account the number of species present, which is our species richness, as well as the relative abundance or evenness of a species. So we're going to use my 2 communities, community A and B. And what I find if I look at the formula is we have a couple different letters, I guess. So we have a lowercase n, which is the total number of organisms of a particular species. So in my community A, it's all even, right? I have 4 of each kind of tree, and then I have my total number of organisms in the whole community. Now, that may be hard if you're like in a rainforest to count every single organism, but here's just a example, right? So what I would find here, if I look at the formula, it's 1 minus the sum of all the different species that we have. So the total number of organisms of a particular species divided by the total squared. So here I have 4 species, so I have 4 like values I'm going to end up adding together. And when I actually like calculate this all out, my diversity index is 0.75. Now, if we look at community B, I do the same thing and I find that my diversity index is 0.42. Now, how we interpret this is that the higher the Simpsons diversity index, so here 0.75, it shows that species A has a greater overall species diversity. It's like a bit more stable of an ecosystem. It would be better at responding to disruptions to that ecosystem or that community, and overall has a greater diversity index compared to community B. And really the reason for this is that one species in community B pretty much dominates the whole ecosystem. And so that's what is the downfall for community B. All right, great job.